Hi to those of you who are joining. We're just going to allow people to join and we will get going in a couple of minutes. Hi, welcome to you who are joining right now. We're just going to allow for more people to join. We'll get going in a couple of minutes. Great to see so many people joining. Welcome to you all. We will just give it a couple more minutes and then we will get cracking. Hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to you all. I think we will get started. I can see there's still more people joining, but it's fantastic to see so many of you who have already joined. So good afternoon. My name's Alex Day. I am the director of The Big Give, and I've got the easiest job this afternoon by just welcoming you all and saying that we're absolutely stoked to have you all taking part in our first ever Women and Girls Match Fund. Just a little sort of brief intro as to who's on the call today. So we have myself, Bethany, Sahil, and Marina from The Big Give. And we're also super excited to have Caitlin and Rachel from IG Advisors, who we are partnering with on this campaign, and you'll be hearing a lot more from both Beth from The Big Give and Caitlin and Rachel this afternoon. And I've seen the deck that they're going to present this afternoon. It looks amazing, so I'm really excited for you all to see it. I think the final thing for me to say before I sort of hand over to Beth is we are sort of really excited about running this campaign for the first time. Obviously, the match funding for this campaign is from DCMS. I think that probably the last few weeks for you all and us have been quite hectic, getting applications in and sort of getting notifications out. Probably sort of more hectic than we would usually have planned for, but that's the sort of nature of government funding. It's often quite last minute. And if anyone from DCMS is listening in, we're super grateful that you provided this funding, by the way. And yeah, we're just really excited to be working with you all and support you all in this campaign, which I hope and I expect will be an amazing opportunity for your organizations and the amazing work that you do. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Beth, and we're going to sort of kick off the webinar this afternoon. But yeah, I hope you all enjoy it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. Just wait for the slides to come up. Fabulous. So thank you all again for joining us for this webinar. We're going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to review the webinar again on our YouTube channel if you want to, and we'll also make the slides available for you to view as well in your charity portal afterwards. So feel free to use the chat function throughout the session. You just need to set it to everyone, and then you can introduce yourself in the chat, share your ideas throughout the session. And of course, if you have any issues at all, please do put it in there as well. Throughout the session, if you do have any questions, you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Please do use that and we'll get to them throughout the session and at the end. There'll also be a few live polls during the session and they should pop up as they come, but if you do have any issues seeing them, please again let us know. And also just a reminder that you are muted during the session, so again, please feel free to use the chat function. For anyone who has needs a bit more accessibility, you'll see a transcript button at the bottom of the page. If you click show subtitles, you'll also be able to access subtitles for this session as well. So just a little introduction about us. We're the Big Give. We're the UK's biggest match funding platform and we're a registered charity as well, founded by Sir Alec Reid. And our mission is to provide a platform to promote causes and multiply generosity. And we do this in a few ways. One, we organise and run match funding campaigns. So the Women and Girls Match Fund, as Alex said, it's our newest campaign. And we showcase charities and their work. We also allow charities to run their own match funding campaigns on our platform. And through all of these campaigns, we've raised an amazing 186 million for thousands of great causes through the power of match funding. So we've seen that match funding is a great incentive and something your charities can really make use of as you take part in this campaign. And just a little bit of info about the Women and Girls Match Fund in general. It starts on International Women's Day and the campaign runs for 7 days between the 8th and the 15th of March. So if you haven't already, put that in your calendars. All charities will have their own campaign page on the Big Give and you should have access to that already. So if you haven't accepted your offer, you'll need to log into your Big Give portal and accept your offer to take part. You should then see a little view campaign page button on the side of your dashboard so you can see the campaign page. All donations will need to come through that page during that campaign week and they are matched again by that DCMS tampon tax funding. So you should already know how much match funding you have ring-fenced for your campaign. And just a little bit extra into that, donations need to be made via the Big Give and by credit, debit card or Google Pay and Apple Pay. So please do again, keep that in mind as you're planning your campaign. As well, on the dashboard, you'll be able to access all of your resources. So again, if you want to review the webinar, look at the slides, have a look at our marketing guidebook, all of these resources are available in the charity portal for you. Sorry, Caitlin, can we just go back one slide? Thank you. So in terms of how the match funding is broken down, you have your online donations and your DCMS tampon tax funding award. Any donations that come through the Big Give campaign page during that campaign week are matched by that DCMS tampon tax fund. So you will receive everything you successfully matched. Let's say your online donation target is £10,000 and you only raise £6,000. That's 6,000 DCMS tampon tax funding that's matched. That's 12,000 raised altogether for your charity. So again, if you're new to digital fundraising or this is your first time with the Big Give campaign, please don't worry, you will receive everything you have successfully raised during that week. Next slide, please. Thank you. And just a few general application statistics. I'm sure all of you are kind of wondering what charities are involved in this campaign. We received over 200 applications and we are delighted that we have 120 offers that have been sent out to amazing women and girls charities across England and Scotland. And the large majority of those charities have an annual income under 1 million. So again, if you're a small charity, this is your first time doing a digital fundraising campaign, you're not alone. There are lots of other charities here all going through the same thing and we're going to be helping you through this process. And again, if you look at the statistics here, 73% of those charities that are taking part are completely new to the Big Give. So lots of exciting statistics and we're just really excited to get this started. And on that note, I'll pass on to our amazing partners, IG Advisors.
Thanks so much, Beth. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Stephenson-Sheff. I'm the Managing Director of IG Advisors. I'll quickly tell you a little bit about who we are and what you do so that you know our involvement in this campaign. It will make a lot more sense. So we are a London-based but globally focused strategy and management consultancy, and we focus exclusively on social and environmental change. What that means in practice and how that's relevant to today is that we work a lot with donors, so people that have resources that they want to create impact with, and sometimes that's individual people, that's families, it's big foundations, it's companies, it's governments, it's councils, it's whatever that body is that has the assets, and we help them with their philanthropic strategies. But we also work with charities and with nonprofits on their strategy, and that can be a whole variety of different things, whether that's the operations or governance or strategic planning. But most often it's actually fundraising. So we're in this unique position where we work with both donors and fundraisers, and we like to translate a lot of knowledge across that bridge. I should also mention that one of our core areas of passion and expertise is gender justice and women and girls' rights and equality in the UK and beyond. So it's just an absolute delight to be partnering with the Big Give on this campaign. It feels like a really nice intersection of our passions as a firm. So it's a real delight to be here. On the next slide, we've just put a little bit about who we are personally. So as I said, I'm Rachel, I'm the Managing Director. My background before coming to IG was actually in major gifts fundraising and communications. Sorry, I just saw that note from you, Sarah. Yes, I will absolutely slow down. Thank you for that. So my background is in fundraising. So I've been an in-house fundraiser for a variety of different causes, mostly in the social justice arena. So I have a lot of relevant experience to bring to today as well. I'll be leading the second half of the training, but my colleague Caitlin is going to be leading the first half. So before we finish with the intros and everything, I'll just quickly hand over to her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm a junior advisor at IG. I work on a lot of fundraising projects for the organisation. And as Rachel said, I'll be leading part of the strategy session for you all today. And I'm really excited for it. So yeah, over to you again, Rachel.
All right. So before we dive into the first half of the training, on the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Caitlin. Okay, so this is just a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. There's two kind of key sections to this. So this is the introduction part. It will be over in a few minutes. The first half of the training run by Caitlin will be all around your internal goals and resources and some reflective exercises to help you articulate that. Then we will take a break, so don't worry, there will be a 5-minute break. And then we will come back for the second half of the training, which I'll lead on. And that's all about the more external pieces of fundraising. So thinking about your donor audiences and your prospects and how to leverage that for success in this campaign and beyond. And then we will wrap up with a Q&A at the very end. So as we said, we can of course answer questions as they come up along the way, but any big questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box, not the chat, but the Q&A box. And then we will make sure to address those at the end. This is just a brief overview of what's coming up next, because this is one of several trainings that we're running with the Big Give. So today is all about introducing the campaign, going through fundraising strategy. The next session, which is next week, is going to be about communications, i.e. the messaging, the pitching, how to craft a compelling narrative for your campaign. The next one after that will be about communication channels and social media specifically. And then we will go on to our Ask the Panel session, which will be quite interesting, which is going to be essentially an interview or a panel discussion with charities who have done past Big Give campaigns, and they will share their experiences, their successes, their challenges, everything that you should be aware of and take into your own work. Then the campaign will actually happen. And then after that, we will come back for the very final and fifth session, which will be a post-campaign reflection and a donor cultivation session, i.e. how can you take all of the relationships that you managed to cultivate over the course of the campaign, the people that donated to you, what should you do with them after the campaign is done, and how can you make sure that those relationships remain sustainable over time? So before we get into it, we wanted to pause and just have a moment to say, what is crowdfunding? Because it's best not to make any assumptions. And in the fundraising world, there's a lot of jargon that's tossed around. So we want to keep this really, really clear and simple. What is crowdfunding? Well, quite simply, it is fundraising by asking a large number of people for their support and welcoming smaller donations. So this campaign can have donations of any amount. It could be £5, it could be £5,000. So we really want to have that range there. And crowdfunding or digital fundraising, of course, really depends on the use of online channels to be successful, such as social media, but not necessarily limited to that, for greater reach. And a very key thing to note here, which we will go into more detail on, is the fact that while it does take place online, it's really important to leverage your offline channels and bring them into that online arena for success. So it's not the separation of online and offline, it's just about where the majority of the action takes place. And then finally, crowdfunding or any good campaign is time bound. So there's a certain limit to when people can donate within that. And that is a really good mechanism to incentivize people to donate quickly and within that time frame. And of course, the match is just another added bonus, another incentive that gets people donating. So before we get into session one, led by Caitlin, we wanted to ask how you are doing. We don't want to make any assumptions. We're going to cover a wide range of content here, but this is the poll that we'd love to start with. So we want to know, how comfortable are you with digital fundraising? So I'm not sure if we actually have a poll on the screen. We may do this on the chat instead. Is that correct, Big Give Team, or do we have a poll?
If you click on the poll,
oh, great. Okay.
It should be set up.
I don't have a poll one on my screen.
I will try that.
It may just be an admin thing.
Okay, I will launch the poll now.
Thank you so much, Sam. Perfect. Okay, so if you could please let us know where on this spectrum you currently feel, and I mean you as an individual. So you don't necessarily have to speak on behalf of your whole organization, but you as an individual human right now, where on this scale of not comfortable at all, please help me, through to I'm super confident I could run the training myself, I can't wait to get started. Let us know how you're feeling. So just take 5 to 10 seconds to put your answer there. And then Sahil, if you wouldn't mind just publishing the results so everyone can see at the end.
I think everyone's answers in. Share results. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so there's no one in the super confident bucket. That's no problem. That's a good mission for us. We're going to try and push some of you up there by the end of the session. But there's a lot in the middle, which makes total sense. And then there's some at the bottom, which is also completely fine. That's why you're here. This is definitely not rocket science. It's a blend of a little bit of science and structure and formality, but then also a lot of intuition. So this is absolutely something you can excel at, and we're really delighted to be able to support you with that. So thank you. Thanks for answering so honestly. It really helps us to make sure that we're providing the right level of detail throughout the session. So that's enough for me for now. And over to you, Caitlin, for the first half.
Yeah, thank you. So hello, everyone. We're going to be diving into the bulk of the training now, which is all about coming up with a strategy for your digital fundraising campaign. And there are 2 main objectives of this session. So the first one is we're going to set goals and identify useful resources. So thinking about what our strengths are, what our assets are, and how they can help us achieve our ambitions. And we're also going to look to understand donor audiences and how to leverage our networks for success. And it's worth noting that we would love for this session to be really interactive. So throughout, there will be a number of taster exercises and activities, which are basically really useful tools that are going to help you to start thinking about some of these questions. We won't necessarily have time to finish all of them on the call. But if you find them useful, if you find them interesting, then please do feel free to complete them after the session, introduce them to your team. So yeah, let's jump into our first half of the training, which is all about tools and resources. So one thing that we always recommend for any fundraising campaign is having really clear ambitions for what we want to achieve. So this means understanding what success looks like, but also understanding what success looks like both in the short term. So in the context of this campaign, we're thinking about by the 16th of March, the day after the campaign week has ended, but also thinking about the long term. So a year after your participation in this campaign, what do you want to have achieved off the back of that? So we're going to move into an exercise to encourage you to start thinking about these questions. So we would love for you all to take a few minutes to visualize what success looks like. So we would like to invite you all to close your eyes, if that feels comfortable. If you'd rather keep them open, that's also completely fine. But we would love for you to take a minute to imagine the following scenario. It's the 16th of March. The campaign has ended and it has gone brilliantly. It's been a huge success and you're now reflecting on that. So first of all, how do you feel? Just a few seconds to think about how we're feeling. Do you feel proud? Do you feel excited? And the second question, what have you achieved by the 16th of March that has made the campaign so worthwhile? So it's the 16th of March, the campaign has ended and it's been a huge success. What have you achieved? So just a few seconds to quietly reflect. And if you're struggling for inspiration, do feel free to open your eyes. We've included a little box with some suggestions. Have you gained new knowledge and skills? Have you reached a particular income goal? And once you kind of start to have a really clear image in your head of success, we would love for you to share in the chat what success looks like on the 16th of March. So please do feel free to open your eyes, start taking notes or drawing what success looks like, and please also share with us in the chat. We would love to see. Someone sent through a lot of pound signs. Yeah, I feel like that's probably a lot of people's goals by the end of the 16th of March. So that's a great one. Oh, some really interesting ambitions around bringing the cause to new audiences. A lot of feelings of relief and empowerment and excitement. I love the elated with an exclamation mark. Awareness raising, reach. A lot about how the supporters are feeling. So, you know, making sure the supporters are feeling proud and enthusiastic. These are really, really great ideas. Raising the organization's profile. Confidence with social media. We would definitely recommend all of you to read through the chat because there are some really, really interesting ideas and inspiration for what your ambitions could look like. Again, some really interesting ones around how clients feel and making sure clients feel heard and valued some really, really interesting points. Okay, that's perfect. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And please do feel free to continue sharing if you didn't have a chance to. But we're going to move on to our second scenario. So this time we want to visualize success, but we're thinking about the longer term. So again, we would like to invite all of you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable. If you'd rather keep them open, that's also fine. But we're going to visualize success in the following scenario. So it has been a whole year since the Women and Girls Match Fund ended. What have you achieved since as a result? So it's a whole year after the campaign. What does success look like? Have you gained internal buy-in for another digital fundraising campaign? Maybe some of the new supporters you reached have continued to support your project and your mission again. So again, just a few seconds to start thinking about that. And when it feels right, please do feel free to open your eyes and share with us in the chat, but also take some notes down for yourself around what success looks like a year from now. We have an interesting ambition around kind of taking the organization's profile up a level. That's a really great one. Further digital fundraising, further participation in Big Give campaigns. That's exciting for the Big Give. Increased awareness of both brand, but also of cause. A lot about confidence, which is really, really exciting because that's also what we would love for you to get out of these training sessions with us. Oh, a really interesting point about a year from now having established a blueprint. So yeah, one of the things we're going to be looking at if you join us for our final session is kind of reflecting on learnings and thinking about how do we take them forward. So hopefully that will be an interesting opportunity to start thinking about coming up with your blueprint for future success. Okay, well, that's amazing. So many really, really interesting ambitions and visions for success. Stuff around changing the culture, growing an unrestricted funding base, and ambitions around empowerment as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those ideas. We're going to move on to the next part of this exercise. But if you found this useful, obviously, please do feel free to take away, do with your team, continue thinking about this after the session ends. Okay, so now that we know what our ambitions are and what success looks like, it's really useful to set goals that are going to help us to achieve those ambitions. And in particular, we want to set SMART goals. So SMART goals are realistic goals for achieving our ambitions. These can be financial. So it could be about raising X amount of, unlocking X amount of match funding. They can be non-financial. So it could be about producing one promotional video for the campaign. They can be short and longer term, like our ambitions. But as we said, it's important to keep them SMART. So SMART stands for specific. So we want to avoid generic statements like, we want to have a successful campaign. We really want to be concrete about what that means. We want them to be measurable. So can you measure the goal? Who will measure it? What will be measured? They should be attainable. So even though we want to be ambitious and push ourselves, we also don't want to burn out and be overwhelmed. We want them to be relevant. So when you're setting these goals, keep in mind the ambitions that we've just established. And we want them to be time-based. So being really clear about when do we need to achieve these goals. And again, we would love to start thinking about these now. And just to give an example of what SMART actually means in practice, we have a couple of example goals here. So the first one is unlock X quantity of match funding between the 8th and the 15th of March. So as you can see, it's very specific. We can measure it. It's time bound as well. So that's a really great example. Another example could be gain X number of new followers on Twitter between the 1st and 15th of March, or produce one new promotional video between the 9th of February and the 8th of March before the campaign begins. So we would love for you to just spend a few minutes thinking about at least one SMART goal on the call now. So we'll give you a minute or two to start thinking about that. And then as with last time, we would love for you to share those goals with us in the chat. And thank you, Rachel, for reminding everyone in the chat what SMART stands for. So is your goal very specific and concrete? Can we measure it? Is it realistic? Think about those ambitions that you've just established. Are the goals relevant to those? Oh, we have a goal shared. Thank you so much. Yeah, a great goal around producing one piece of promotional material that can be shared by the start of the campaign. I imagine that that's probably going to be a goal for quite a few organizations. And it's great that we have that time element as well. We know when we want to produce the material by. Promotional video. Yeah, so it's another good goal. Maybe think about when do you want to produce that promotional video by? When do you want to work on it between? Onboard 2 new corporate partners throughout the campaign. That's a really great specific, it's not just any partner. It's a very specific goal there. Reach 14 new donors between the 8th and 15th of March. Again, that's a really great measurable goal, very specific, probably very relevant because I'm sure we're all looking to gain new supporters. A lot of videos and a lot of ambitions around new donors. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, really remembering that we want to be as specific with these as possible and make sure that we're clarifying when we want to achieve these goals, because that's going to help us stay really focused. So for example, if you're looking to produce something with your Twitter followers, can we be specific about what exactly we want to produce, and when we need to produce it by? These are all really, really great ideas. So I think we will move on because it looks like the chat is becoming quiet. But again, this is an exercise that we would invite you to take away, get other people in your team involved. But yeah, really well done, everyone. And thank you so much again for sharing with us. Okay, so far we have established our ambitions. We have set goals to reach those ambitions. But now we need to understand what strengths and resources do we have to be able to achieve those targets and those dreams and visions of success, which is where we always really recommend a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a really great tool because it helps you identify, okay, what do we already have in place that is going to be really, really useful for succeeding in our campaign? But it equally allows you to identify what are the gaps, what are the risks that we might need to be mindful of. And one thing that we really, really wanted to stress is that you might actually be better prepared than you think. So obviously in the poll earlier, we saw that some people are maybe less comfortable or familiar with digital fundraising. But one thing we would stress is that a lot of the skills that go into offline fundraising are also really relevant to online. So, maybe you have excellent communication skills or great case studies and statistics and quotes to demonstrate impact. These are all things that are equally relevant for online campaigns. The other point, which is something that Rachel has already mentioned, is that even though a lot will be going on online, offline channels will also be relevant to direct people online and bring them onto your digital platforms. And equally, you probably already have a great networks of supporters, of trustees, of staff, of partners who can support you through the campaign. So as we go into this SWOT analysis, we would really encourage you, if you don't have as much digital fundraising experience, to think about all those transferable skills and assets. So how does a SWOT analysis actually work? We would love for you to think about your strengths and weaknesses. And this is normally more internal looking. So looking inwards at your organization. And also think about opportunities and threats. And these are more outward looking. These are more external factors that could have an impact on your campaign. And it's worth remembering that these strengths and opportunities and weaknesses, these can be personal. So it could be, I'm really hardworking and committed to this campaign, and that's a huge strength. But they can also be organizational. So our organization has great video assets or a great social media following that's going to set us up for success. So we're going to spend a few minutes working on this exercise now. We would love for you to aim to come up with at least 1 or 2 ideas for each category. And we've put some prompts up. So strengths, what are you good at? What skills and resources do you have? Weakness, what are you struggling with? What are you lacking? Opportunities, what's out there that you can leverage? And threats, what risks do you foresee? But I would also like to draw your attention to this slide if you need some further inspiration. So a couple of minutes on this. And again, we would love to hear from you in the chat. One of your top strengths and opportunities, but also one of your top weaknesses or threats. Oh, we have a strength about kind of being able to reach out to a lot of grassroots communities. So yeah, that could be definitely an interesting opportunity to leverage your networks there. An opportunity to, a strength being having great case studies. That's going to be really helpful for thinking about communicating impact, communicating why your organization, and those are themes that we will be picking up in the next training session next week around messaging and pitching. So if you're interested in leveraging all those great case studies, that could be an interesting session. Yeah, so a great strength is having a really passionate team. The team can make a big difference. So that's really great. Yeah, strength being able to communicate in different languages. Again, that will be great when it comes to communicating to supporters. So also some weaknesses though, which weaknesses are just as important and threats are just as important to recognize, because once we know those, we can be empowered with that information. So we can identify whether this is information we need to act on. Is this information, we need to work to mitigate? So it's great that people are thinking about those as well. So just looking at some of those: small capacity, limited capacity, that's a struggle that we do see a lot, but definitely you won't be the only person in that situation. And hopefully, once you've identified all of your pre-existing skills and assets and all of the opportunities out there, that will really help you, because it'll help you make sure you're not duplicating work unnecessarily. So a really great weakness Swan pointed out is, for safeguarding reasons, not being able to share images of beneficiaries. That's a really great point, that obviously we want to be respecting all of our safeguarding policies, etc. But there are definitely other ways to create nice visuals and to communicate the impact of work. So while on the one hand, you might say that's a weakness, there's definitely an opportunity to create other materials there. Short time frame, that's very true. It's a very quick turnaround. But again, recognizing that we're all in the same boat, we're all going to get through this together, but also this exercise should help you identify what you already have in place so that you're not wasting time on trying to do everything again. But that's a great point to be thinking about. Yeah, a lot of stuff about capacity and busyness being an issue. But again, as we've said, you know, through exercises like this, it's going to be really helpful to think about everything you already have in place. And a lot of strengths about great networks, dedicated teams, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all these. Yeah, and we've got a great point that, you know, even if you're feeling that you're limited on capacity, there's definitely an opportunity to leverage your supporters and ask them to help you spread the word. And that's something that we will be coming to later. So hold that thought. So we're going to move on. Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes left for this session, so we'll move on. But again, would definitely invite you to take this exercise away, complete it, invite other team members to input. And then once you have an idea of what your strengths and opportunities are, make sure that you're making the most of those. And equally with weaknesses and threats, you know, get creative about how you can work around them. And hopefully some of our training sessions will give you some tools and ideas for navigating some of those. Perfect. So the final slide of this section before we move on is all about taking care of your team. Although that's the title of this slide because it has a nice ring to it, but it's also definitely about taking care of yourself. So it's really important to celebrate your success, no matter how small. Make sure that you're acknowledging all of the incredible work and achievement that that's taking place. Be kind to yourself. So anything above 0 is an achievement. Hopefully even joining this training session today, hopefully you've learned something or been able to think through some strategic questions, and that's already a great achievement. Protect your time. So a lot of the kind of weaknesses mentioned were around limited capacity, it being a busy time. So do make sure that you're ring fencing time for the campaign, that you're blocking out time in your calendar, doing what you need to do to protect that time. Make sure you're communicating your needs. So another thing that came through a lot in the strengths was around having a really dedicated, committed, hardworking team. So make sure you're communicating your needs to that team. And finally, take breaks, especially when everything's happening online, on really fast-moving social media platforms. It can be very easy to get really engrossed and kind of forget to disconnect, take some time to yourself to rest and recover. So that brings us on to our own break time before Rachel takes over. So maybe a 5 to 6 minute break. So let's reconvene at 1:55, and then Rachel can take over. So thank you so much, everyone, for all of your contributions to the session so far.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a nice break, and thank you so much for all the incredible participation so far. And thank you, of course, to Caitlin for that awesome first session. So now we're going to get into the second half of things, and I'm going to be speaking for about 15 or so minutes. We're going to make sure that we end by, or that I end my session by about 2:15-ish, so that we have the last 15 minutes at least for Q&A. So just a reminder as well, as I'm speaking, as questions come up that have to do with what I'm speaking about, or they may have nothing to do with what I'm speaking about, all of that is okay. Please pop them into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom bar of your screen. And as much as you can remember, please do pop them into that box rather than the chat box, because things can get lost in the chat. So the Q&A is for questions. All right, so this session, the second half, is all about understanding who your donors or your potential donors are. What do they want? What do they need? How can you reach them? How can you engage them? How can you make sure that you leverage this campaign for maximum success? So before we dive into that, just wanted to start by speaking broadly about the different kinds of donors that exist, that are out there right now, and which ones, what are their characteristics, and which ones are the most appropriate for a campaign like this. So I'm going to speak through these core types of donors, but the main thing to flag before we do so is that in order to donate via this campaign, your donors will need to be able to pay via credit card or debit card, actually. So that is a core functionality that's important to keep in mind. So for example, a big government body or a corporate, you want to make sure that you're making that really clear and managing their expectations on that front, because that is the needed functionality for donations into this campaign. So that's first and foremost. Not surprisingly, that means that the most appropriate or the most successful, based on the Big Give's history, the donors that you will probably find that with are the top two, the general public and major donors. That does not mean that other donors can't give to you through this campaign or won't. That is absolutely not true. I know someone mentioned earlier that they're very keen to get some new corporate partners via this. So all of that is possible, but the credit card piece does lend itself quite naturally to the general public and to major donors. So I do want to flag that. But let me go now through the different types and speak about their common characteristics. So the good news is that all of these types of donors respond well to a matched incentive. That is scientifically proven, as time and time again, it delivers the ability to unlock more funding via your gift, to turn £1 into £2 or whatever that is. Psychologically, it's really incentivizing. It means doubling your impact, and it means please give now, otherwise you won't be able to do that after the campaign ends. So that's fantastic. And the last thing I'll say as well, before I go into the specifics, is that in general, across all donor types, no matter who they are, the thing that we always come back to at IG is that it's about relationships. It's about relationship building. And that doesn't mean that someone can't give transactionally to a campaign within a certain time. But if you really want to grow these relationships and make them sustainable and continue to cultivate and steward those donors over the long term after the campaign is ended, relationship management and building trust and building rapport and kind of deepening that connection is really essential to success on that front. So we begin with the general public. Pretty self-explanatory. It is the people like you and I, all out there going about our daily lives. The trick with the general public is that they can be hard to reach because it is everyone. And if it's everyone, it can be no one at the same time. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of competition. So it is important to find some sort of hook or leverage point or what is your slogan, what is your campaign message, but it's absolutely possible to engage them. They do tend to give small amounts, especially if they've never heard of you before, or if this is just something that's come across their desk. However, if you can engage them at scale, if you have a really compelling campaign, then the return on investment can be quite significant. And those small gifts can quickly compound into something much larger. So it's certainly worth considering how a campaign like this might be appropriate for that kind of audience. I know the Big Give or charities who have participated in the Big Give in the past have had a lot of success on that front. The second audience is what we call major donors, and that is a short term for wealthy individual people, high net worth individuals, maybe not necessarily high net worth, but people who are able to give at a significant amount to you, however you define that. For some charities, that could be £100. For others, it could be £1 million. The definition of what is a major gift is highly subjective, and it's based on your individual context and your circumstance and your turnover. But what we're talking about here are essentially wealthy people, wealthy individuals who have disposable income that they can direct in large amounts towards a charity. Now, major donors are amazing. If you have them in your network, they can be flexible, loyal, they're able to give big sums, they're open to learning and emotional connection, they can bring things other than money to the table. However, on the flip side, they don't tend to be super transparent about their wealth or their preferences. Sometimes what they speak about publicly doesn't at all match how they give behind the scenes. And they are hard to reach. I wish that we get asked all the time, oh, you know, isn't there just a list or a database of all the rich people in the UK that we can tap up for a gift? And unfortunately, the answer is no. That's not really how these things work. And even if there was that magic list, we wouldn't recommend that you cold email everyone on that list, because this comes back to relationships. Major donors are constantly oversaturated with asks and requests for their time and their money and their expertise, their resources. So really the best way to get in the door is via a connection. Even if that connection is obscure as you went to uni with their nephew twice removed in a different part of the world, it doesn't matter. Whatever the obscure connection is, it can help open that door. It can start the relationship off on a warm note. And it's really, really useful. So they can be the best when you have them, but they are difficult to reach. So that is a caveat. It's a trade-off, and that's kind of just the name of the game. But it is worth thinking about how you can reach that network. And there is one thing I'll say here as well, there's often a misconception of, well, you know, I don't know any high net worth individuals, so how on earth am I supposed to break into that world? And it's true that there are a lot of unfortunate power dynamics with that, in terms of it is an inaccessible world, and that's just a full stop. But you likely know more people than you think. And on this front, I really recommend using LinkedIn as a tool to identify connections. It's really quite useful, and leveraging your trustee boards or your ambassadors or your partners or whomever is in your network, because they might be closer than you think. Now we move on to foundations, who are also quite excellent types of donors. Their whole purpose is to give away money to causes that they care about and often speak about transparently and publicly. So that's kind of a fundraiser's dream. Not every foundation, but most. They are there to give away money to a cause. And so they're very transparent about their mission and their strategy. And they have deep pockets, they can give significant amounts, they can give multi-year gifts. You can have multiple relationships with different people within the institution to make that sustainable over time. The one caveat here is that you need to make sure that they can donate via the credit card functionality, but if you have the right relationship with the right people, that shouldn't be a big issue. And there's definitely a lot of foundations in the UK that are giving to gender as a broad concept, but also women and girls specifically, and gender justice, and many of the other intersections that operate within this world. So it's really worth thinking about foundations on this front. On the government side, governments are, I'd say they're a more complicated type of donor. They can give a lot. They have, again, deep pockets. It depends. I know for sure there's been lots of budget cuts on so many fronts. But when priorities align, there are large budgets and multi-year budgets available to charities. And there's also a really cool opportunity to influence local or national priorities. So that could be a certain local council, or it could be up to central or national government. That said, no surprise here, government funders are extremely bureaucratic. They are slow moving, they're under a lot of scrutiny, they're facing cuts every day. They are, to some extent, less socially driven and more results focused, because they have a lot of stakeholders to report to and a lot of pressure to get that right. And they're not as flexible or as nimble or as influenceable as the foundations and the major donors that might be within your network. So I would say for a campaign like this, I don't think you want to go out to new governments. This is probably not the best cultivation opportunity for that. But we do know that there are some charities that are being funded by their council. And this is, and if that's the case, if they're already within your circle, then this is a good opportunity to share with them, to send a campaign to them and say, hey, would you help us out? Or would you signal boost it? Or would you share it with your community? Because you never know what can happen. And then finally, last but certainly not least, corporates. We get a lot of questions about corporates. I know it's already been mentioned in the chat as well. And they can be brilliant donors and they can be really challenging donors. So just to be completely transparent about that front, companies tend to give the least amount of cash, but shout about it the most. So there's a lot of misconceptions. You would think that they give away millions and millions a year, but actually, if you look behind the scenes, if you want to have a really successful relationship with a business, you will figure out a way to leverage their assets that are not just cash. So cash is an important part of that, of course, but I would think about the in-kind opportunities on that front. So thinking about their products, their staff time and expertise, their physical spaces, office space or event space, anything like that, pro bono things that they could give to you. That is what leads to a really sustainable and effective corporate partnership, because you're able to unlock budgets that are other than CSR or philanthropy. You can unlock marketing budgets, things like that, which is really quite useful. And you can help kind of get them into your circle in the long run if you're able to get more value from them other than their cash. So they don't tend to be very transparent. Their priorities shift all the time. Many businesses don't even have a full-time staff member dedicated to impact or to philanthropy or to CSR. It's usually about 25% of someone's job, and they probably haven't done it before. That's of course not always the case, but time and time again, that is certainly the trend. So I would approach with caution on that front. But that said, if there are businesses that are really aligned with your mission, if it makes sense, if there's that kind of strategic alignment, but also an alignment on the human level, again, this is all about relationships, they are absolutely worth having on board, and a good brand can really boost your own brand. So there's a lot of mutual and shared value on that front. So corporates, especially the bottom three, the foundations, the governments, and the corporates, I can't stress enough that while they are institutions, they're just people. They're people like you and I at their desks, doing their jobs, trying their best, making mistakes like we all do. So keep that human connection intact when you're trying to cultivate relationships with them. When you're sharing this campaign with them, they're just human beings, and this is a really awesome opportunity to support charities like yours. So don't forget that. Okay, on the next slide, we get into the motivations, because it's first you need to figure out who you're targeting. So that's, pick your target audiences. And for this campaign, I should say, you want to start first with your low-hanging fruit. Who are you already connected to, or are you 1 or 2 degrees removed from, that you can bring into your circle of influence? You want to start with that first. And with those audiences, with those identified potential or current donors, you want to understand their motivations, because giving is rarely purely altruistic. That is part of it. Impact, of course, you see it's number 1 on this list, but I would be lying if I said that was the only thing. And to be a smart fundraiser, you want to leverage and fully capitalize on all of the different motivations that donors bring to the table. And that is okay. That is exactly what you should be doing. So what we always recommend is listing out all of the reasons why you think someone would or should or could give to your charity. And this is a list. This is a list to prompt inspiration on that front. It's not necessarily exhaustive or completely true for your individual context, but you want to think about things like impact. So of course, wanting to create impact, wanting to do good, the exclusivity of giving to a charity and the access to the opportunities that money potentially can't buy for them, the access to your cutting edge expertise in the sector that they care about, the connections that they may get as a result of being a donor to you, who else is donating to you, do they want to form relationships with those people, and is this a good opportunity to do so? The influence, that's a very important and sometimes tricky ones, because donors often want to be involved strategically in your work. They want to bring all their expertise and ideas to the table, and sometimes it's not very useful. So the job of a fundraiser is to have a vehicle to welcome that and say, oh, this is fantastic, but also not to engage in mission drift where you change what you're doing just because a donor has a good idea. So there is a boundary to set there, but it's important to be mindful of that motivation. The engagement, of course, kind of getting deeply involved in a community that matters to them or that they're interested in. And then of course, profile raising. It's true for all kinds of donors, whether they're major donors, foundations, governments, corporates. Giving to a charity in a public way leverages or strengthens someone's public profile, and that's important to many donors. So instead of shying away from the slightly less impact-driven motivations, it's important to just acknowledge them upfront. So what we always recommend on this front exactly is listing out all the reasons why you think someone would give to you, from the most altruistic to the least. And we would recommend creating a chart like this. So on the top, you can see the categories across the right of motivations, donor motivations. Down the left, you can see an illustrative list of opportunities that you can give the donors as a charity. So this is certainly not exhaustive. We've just given you some examples that some of our clients have offered. But what you want to do is understand, what can you give donors in return for their gift? Is that a seat on a board? Is it access to match funding? Yes, in this case, of course. Is it access to an event that you're hosting that's super cool and exclusive? Priority access to certain projects, certain reports, whatever that is, think about all the things you could offer. And then we always recommend mapping that against the motivations to understand where you have gaps, where the majority, if you think there's a particularly strong motivation for your cause, you want to make sure that what you're offering in return really ticks all of those boxes. And the key thing to note here is that you want to offer things that are of low or no cost to you at all, but that feel really exclusive and special to the donor. That's the perfect alchemy that you want to try and achieve. And of course, in something like a crowdfunding campaign, it's quite quick, it's quite time bound. So it's not necessarily that you have to offer a whole slew of these opportunities to every donor that gives to you. Of course not. You have to think about where it makes most sense, what's most appropriate. But what you want to do in this campaign is get people to give to you, and then you want to extend those relationships over the long term. You want to use this campaign as an entry point if someone's new to you, and then you want to keep and hold on to that relationship and cultivate it and steward the potential of what they could potentially give you in the long run. So I'm mindful of time. I'll just take kind of 5 more minutes for this section. So maybe just a little bit over 2:15, apologies, but there's just a few more important slides to go to. So next, what we would recommend always is creating donor personas. And this is a kind of a quite human-centered design technique that tech companies use, for instance, when designing a new app. But the whole idea is, if you're trying to reach out to new donors, if you're trying to get them to give to you, trying to cultivate a relationship with them, keep it going in the long run, you need to be very specific about who you're trying to target and what they would need from you in return. So we always recommend that for any fundraising campaign, strategy, whether that's for a week-long campaign or a 5-year strategy, it doesn't matter. But you should create some very detailed personas of the typical donors that you already attract, as well as the ones that you want to attract in the future. So both your current and your aspirational donors. And these personas can help you focus your time and your attention very carefully. And they can help you tailor your fundraising approaches and build out that list of motivations and potential benefits and make sure that everything is matching up well and strategically. So on the next slide, and you will get this deck as well after the training, so you don't need to worry about copying any of this down. But we recommend that, we're not going to do this now, but offline after the training, that you sit down with your team and you think through your donor personas. For a campaign like this, I'd probably recommend creating about 3, maybe no more than 5. You don't want to get too niche, but you want to have some lowest common denominators of the people that give to you or that might give to you. So we recommend building out some key stats for them, almost like you're creating their social media profile. If you were creating a Facebook page for them or an Instagram page, what would it look like? What's their age? What do they do for a living? What's their lifestyle, their wealth brackets, their experience of giving? Are they a seasoned, sophisticated philanthropist? Is this just a one-off first gift? And the level that you think that would be appropriate for them to give you. And then you want to, on the right, you see we put some emoji prompts, but that's really where you want to think about what do they care about in the world? What are their hobbies that might be relevant to what you do? Why would they give to you? What are their incentives and motivations? Like I said before, for example, their interest in or their knowledge of gender or match funding. And then last but not least, where can you find them? Where are you going to reach them? And where are you going to build that relationship? So these are the kinds of personas that we would recommend you build out for I would say a minimum of 2, a maximum of 5, the sweet spot maybe 3, of the kinds of donors that you want to engage through this Big Give campaign. We've included some examples here. I'll just run through them super quickly of the kinds of things that you may think about populating for yourself if it feels appropriate. So here we've called her the veteran, a woman who's a little bit older, over 65 years. She's retired. She's already an experienced supporter. She's a philanthropist. She might self-identify as such. She's really keen about impact. She's passionate about women and girls. She would probably support regardless of the match, but it's also a nice added bonus. You know, maybe this gets her to donate quicker than she would have otherwise. And she might hear about this opportunity through your charity's direct email communications, through that more offline or non-social media space that links her to where the campaign is happening, and then she gets engaged. So that's one example. The next one we have, we've called her the Instagrammer, someone who's a bit younger, who doesn't necessarily have loads of financial resources, but they're a self-identified influencer on the Instagram. They have a big following, so they can bring a lot of value in signal boosting what you're doing to their following, to their community. They care about social justice. They really care about feminism, intersectional feminism. They want to be involved, but they haven't quite been involved with a movement quite yet. And this could be a really great opportunity for them to attach themselves to a hashtag or a campaign that they really identify with, and that helps them build their own brand. So they may discover the opportunity through social media or through you somewhere else, and then they can get on board, donate a small amount, but signal boost what you're doing to their community and their circles of influence. The very last thing I will say, on the next slide, please. Yes, so the final thing here is all about exploring your network. So as I said before, this can feel quite overwhelming, and I completely understand that. We get a lot of charities that come to us and say, well, this is nice, but we're just not connected to that many people. Our board isn't that engaged in fundraising. How are we going to activate them in this way? How do we go about reaching these new audiences? And it's a fantastic question. And unfortunately, there's no magic marker overnight solution to this, but you definitely know more people and more potential donors than you think. So you want to explore and leverage your existing networks. You want to start with your lowest hanging fruit, the people within your first tier, and then their first tier, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd really encourage you to think about your existing connections, your colleagues, your trustees, volunteers, who follows you on Twitter, any influencers within your network, any press that you're connected to, or sister organizations, partners, schools, community groups. Think creatively, think outside the box, because you truly never know. And then you should decide what you need from them. Maybe not every ask that you make is about giving to the campaign. It could be to some extent, but maybe it's, could you introduce us to this potential donor? Could you signal boost the campaign on your social media channel where you have 1 million followers? Yes, I just saw in the chat, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint, so don't worry. We'll make sure that you have all this information. So we just want to stress here that you don't have to ask every single person or institution for money. There's a lot of ways that other people can add value to a campaign. And the last point here, which is really important, is to think about what your connections will need from you to support you effectively. So what often happens is charities will go, oh, I know so-and-so, and they're really connected to certain wealthy people, to this big foundation we want to cultivate. They have access to a media production company. Maybe they can help us create some assets. Fantastic. But you need to build trust with that connection in order for them to open up those opportunities for you. And that's often where we see things falling a bit flat, because you're rushed. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of time. But what we would really encourage you to do is be very, very clear with those kind of connecting supporters, what you need from them and how you will take their contacts on a journey. So you want to say, thank you so much for introducing us to so-and-so. We're going to ask them to donate to the campaign. Here's the email template we're going to use. We're going to follow up with them afterwards every quarter to give them an update on progress. Things like that. The more transparent you can be with the donor journey that you're taking their connections on, the more likely that you will build trust with them and that they will open their doors and connect you into their world. Okay, very, very last thing before we go on to Q&A. And just a reminder, I don't see too many questions yet in the Q&A, so please do pop them in as I'm speaking. So network mapping, this is when we're thinking about tactics and bringing this into a tangible, okay, it's Monday morning, I'm at my desk, I have my coffee, what the heck do I do about this? This is what we would say. We would start with a network mapping exercise, which is exactly what it sounds like and looks like, which is essentially a visual representation of who you know, who they know, how you could reach them, and thinking really creatively about that. And we would recommend that you do this for yourself, that you do this on behalf of your trustees, and you give them prompts, or your trustees or whomever else you're looking to leverage their networks from. Perhaps it's an ambassador or a partner or a sister organization. You can do this exercise on behalf of them and then take it to them and say, hey, oh, I see you're connected to so-and-so. We really want to cultivate and engage them in this campaign. Could you make an introduction? The most effective way to get people to do that is to give them something to react to, rather than just asking them, who do you know? I often compare this to when someone asks, what book have you read recently? And all of a sudden, I can't remember any book I've ever read, even though I read all the time. But if someone says, of the 5 books, which one did you like the most? All of a sudden, that sparks my inspiration. And I go, oh, that reminds me of something else I've read. So as much as possible, you want to give people materials to react to rather than to create from scratch. So we've put on the next slide here just an example of how you can do this, kind of putting you here, putting your ideal dream donor prospect on the other end, and then mapping your connections to try and meet in the middle. And then finally, on the next slides, we've just given you an example here to show how you might be able to do this. And again, you will receive this PowerPoint, so you can take this. We recommend this is a really good exercise, take 15, 20 minutes and do this maybe every day for a different prospect and see how you can reach them. But this is just an example of me. I'm Rachel. Gabby, who's on the other end, who's my dream donor. And by mapping out who my colleagues are, who my friends are, who my employer is, I can see different pathways to engage Gabby. For example, I have made this up, but I work at the Women and Girls Rule charity. And one of our corporate partners is Nike. And Nike happens to be Gabby's employer. And I know that Gabby was involved in the relationship that the charity has. So I can use that avenue to get to Gabby. Or I can use the fact that I have a friend who has a feminist influencer friend who's quite prominent that Gabby loves to follow. So that could be a nice connective tissue there. The point is to be as creative and kind of thinking broad and thinking across and beyond your existing networks to see where you can develop those connections and then provide bespoke outreach to get them involved in your campaign. Okay, that is the last thing I'll say. Sorry for going a little bit over, but I think now we will go into the Q&A and answer any questions that you have. Okay, so Caitlin, over to you for this.
Yeah, so please feel free to send questions into the box. Just looking through. So a question perhaps for the big give to answer. If we go over our £2,500 target, are the funds still matched?
So your funds will be matched to the point you have match funding available. So if you have a ring-fenced amount of DCMS Temple Tax funding, which is 2,500, that will be matched up to 2,500, and then everything else you raise will be extra unmatched donations for your campaign.
That's amazing. Thank you, Beth. We have another question about finding top tips for finding feminist influencers, which I'm sure Rachel probably already has a lot of tips in mind, but definitely the network mapping exercise that Rachel just outlined is a really great way. So thinking about who are you connected to, who are your colleagues connected to, who are your friends connected to, just anyone who has any vague connection who could help put you in touch. I don't know if you have any other suggestions, Rachel.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's all about who you know and who they know and who they know. But what I will say is that it's important. People often I should have said this earlier, when defining influencer, it doesn't just have to be someone with 10 million followers. Of course, that would be quite nice if, you know, if someone has that kind of outreach and they can signal boost your campaign, but it could also be someone with 1,000 followers who has a highly engaged micro community within their circle of influence that people are really willing to take action from, because that's, you know, converting someone from engaging in a post to taking action to doing a credit card transaction. That is not necessarily a frictionless experience. So you want to, the more that you can go through influencers or people with strong networks that already have that trust built and that can promote them to take that action, the better. So I'd say, I mean, there's many feminist influencers. It depends what social media channel, it depends what your cause is, what your intersections are, where that makes sense, who you're connected to. But I would just encourage you to redefine influencer, and the bigger following doesn't necessarily mean the better. You want to go for people that have trust built and highly engaged communities that they can bring into this for you.
Yeah, so that's great. Thanks, Rachel. And that's a good point about them not needing to have a huge following. We have another question about where to start if you've never done any fundraising before and you don't have a current pool of donors. Definitely a lot of the exercises that we've gone through today are a really great starting point. Working out what resources and assets you have, working out who you're connected to. I don't know if you have any other things you'd input, Rachel.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I hear you, because that can be it can feel overwhelming. But again, I would just say that there's more people in your network than you think. Maybe you don't have a huge history of donors, but that doesn't mean that you don't have colleagues that you work with, that you don't have a board. If you're a charity, you would have to have a board in some way, or a governing body or advisory committee. They are connected to people. You may have gone to, you know, worked at a different place beforehand. You know, there's so many different kinds of networks that you can tap into, and especially from that general public category, which is, you know, of course, we're all connected to the general public. We all are the general public, but you just want to make sure that there's kind of a hook there. But I would encourage you to do that network mapping and to get maybe a close circle of maybe 5 people, whether they're trustees or your colleagues or whomever, and get them to do the same thing. Get around a room, have ring fence time, and say, we're going to go through our LinkedIns and we're going to mine them for connections. And then we're going to share that. You can gamify it, you know, who can find the most connections in the next 5 minutes, they get a prize. Something like that can be quite effective. But I hear you. And I do absolutely believe that there's people at your disposal, but you might just not have identified yet.
Okay, thanks again, Rachel. We have a couple of questions which are more for the big give. So one's around when people can start publicly doing kind of publicity around the campaign. And the other is, when can the page begin to receive donations?
Yep, I can answer those. So essentially, now that you've all received your offers, as soon as you accepted your offer, you can start publicising the campaign whenever suits you. So that may initially start with putting it in your newsletters to get people aware something's coming up, or you might start contacting some of your major donors or your networks, and you might start putting stuff in place for 2 weeks ahead of the campaign. It really depends on your organisation and what works for you, but you can start as soon as you want to. And in terms of the second question, you should all have access to your campaign page already. So if you log into the portal, you should have a button on your campaign dashboard that says view the campaign page, but you will not be able to accept donations until the 8th of March when the campaign starts. So a donate button will appear on that page when the campaign has started at midday on the 8th, and you'll be able to accept donations from that point until the 15th.
That's great. Thank you, Beth. We have a question about a case for support template. So I know that IG produced a field guide for relationship-based fundraising, and there's something in there around that. So I don't know if maybe we can share a link to that in the chat.
Yeah,
we can definitely, we could potentially add that as well to the account areas as well, to make sure that charities have that. And on a similar, just while we're on that point, Kate, as well, in the chat, Teresa's asked, can we have a sample fundraising plan for us to complete, which is, I guess, along the same lines as the case for support. So presumably that field guide would be a good sort of starting point for charities to refer to?
Yeah, there's lots of activities around fundraising strategy in there. So there should be something in there for you.
Right, and we've also just a flag as well. There is also a sort of marketing guide for the campaign, which is also in your resource area in the Big Give account as well, which should be a sort of good starting point. Pick up a lot of the things that we talked about this afternoon, but also other tools and things, questions for you to start thinking through.
Okay, just put the link in the chat.
We're reaching time. I know we still have a couple of questions. Are we okay to just take a couple more minutes to finish these off? Okay, great. So a couple of questions are about corporates. Any tips for engaging corporate supporters? Rachel, you're kind of corporate expert, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. These are good questions. So there's two different ones. Well, actually, they're similar. So one is about, do most corporates, businesses, are they usually able to donate by a credit card? And then someone else asked, we have very few corporate supporters, mostly through employee fundraising and trying to encourage those employees to support. But when they have to do that via payment card, it's already proving tricky. Any tips? Yes, this is a great question. And it is kind of down to user experience. So I'd say in my experience, and please chime in, Big Give, if it's different from your perspective, but in terms of big gifts, if a company is going to give you, thousands of pounds, I would say it's probably unlikely that they would do that through a credit card transaction. It depends on the level of that, but that is a little bit trickier. Mostly it depends on the vehicle. They might have a philanthropic vehicle or a foundation or a DAF that they're giving those significant gifts from, and that's not easily done by a credit card. But that doesn't mean that, to that other question's point, employee engagement is a perfect opportunity for credit card donations in this kind of context. And what you've pointed out here is the friction or that user experience where it's you're trying to convince them to give in the first place, and then you need to send them a link, and et cetera, et cetera. So on that front, what I would say is you want to, whomever your contact is in the company, you want to work really closely with them on that user experience, and you want to figure out who the ask is most appropriate from. We've done this before with companies, for example, with donating or with like signing up to volunteer for a certain thing. The best way to get people to engage is to have the message come from their manager, come from an executive that they respect in the company, to really make sure that whomever is signal boosting that, it's the person that they'll listen to and sit up straight for. So that's a really effective tool. Maybe you can get their manager to send around a link. You of course want to create the comms and make that as easy as possible for that person. But the user experience of this isn't that complicated. I'm sure they would go to the campaign page, and then it's pretty straightforward from there. But you just want to give them all the information that they need up front, and you want to work really closely with your allies, your fellow fundraisers even within that company, to make sure that you're reaching the right employees with the right message at the right time from the right person and in the right way. And that is just a delicate psychological exercise that I think you should collaborate closely with that person on.
Maybe I could just answer very quickly on the mechanism of engaging corporate supporters. So what Rachel has said is absolutely right. I guess we do have, companies, particularly smaller, medium-sized companies, who do have access to a credit card, and I suppose that is, one way. I know as well in the past that there is sort of companies can sort of purchase prepaid credit cards, so they can sort of buy that. There's companies that do that, and if you're interested in doing that, I appreciate that sounds like we're sort of adding friction into the sort of donation journey. I suppose just to very quickly explain sort of why we have that. So the Big Give is a real-time matching platform. So as people donate, your matching pot goes down and your total raised goes up, and that matching happens in real time. And so that's the reason why all of the donations through our platform have to be on debit and credit card, because it's only through a debit and credit card that we can sort of facilitate that sort of real-time element of the campaign. So I know we do sometimes get questions about sort of why can't you accept a check or a bank transfer, and it's because of that sort of real-time element of the platform. Potentially, as sort of technology progresses, we might address that in the sort of coming months and years. But that's the reasons for why it is as it is.
Thanks so much, both. And then the final Q&A question is around fundraising events, which I feel like Rachel will be amazing at answering this for you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an interesting question. So I hope I'm understanding it correctly. Someone had asked, could we hold fundraising events for this campaign? Sure, that's the short answer to that, but I'll say more in a second. Presumably, it would need to go via another person or organization who could then donate the funds to us. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding that correctly, but I would say, just as Alex said, that this is a real-time update campaign, and anyone who has a credit card who can donate. So actually, an event is quite a lovely idea. You could have there's so many ways you could do that, but you could try and, you know, fulfill your whole match within that one event or get people in the room. What works really well in an event context that we've seen is having what I would call peer pressure, although peer influence, peer advocacy, whatever euphemism you want to use, but having someone who is already going to be a donor, a significant donor, co-host the event with you or for you and say, hey, everyone, come to this fabulous party I'm throwing. We're going to, you know, raise awareness and funds for this amazing charity. I'm personally committing X amount. Please join me. You know, let's give by the end of the night and max out our match, and then have a big champagne toast and have a big party, whatever that is. But what works really well for fundraising is time bound, and this campaign is already time bound, but if you can compound that with an event, you know, within this week, I think that could work quite effectively.
I would also just quickly add to that, if your campaign event is running during the campaign week, I know a few of our charities previously taken part in big gift campaigns have had laptops and phones available, so their supporters can just make a donation at that event via debit or credit card via the resources, computers that they have available there. So another option for you to consider as well.
Mm-hmm. I just want to jump in real quick before we wrap up, because I saw, Claire, you've just said about the corporate question. You said, I asked because we were given a significant donation, but I don't think it's going to be possible for the payment card, and I don't want to damage the relationship by pushing. So I completely hear that, but I would say in general, when in doubt, ask. I don't think that you would, if a donor has just given a significant sum to you, then yeah, you know, you want to give them a little bit of time to cool off. You don't want to ask them straight away. Fair enough. But if you think that the logistics of this would be considered pushing too hard, or it might be an inconvenience, I really encourage you not to think that way, because I do understand that. But it shows, by engaging in this campaign in the first place, you're demonstrating that you are working towards financial resilience and sustainability, that you know what you're doing, that you're fundraising masters, that this donor is one of many who are contributing to your cause, that you have a fabulous party that they should join and continue donating to. So any questions that you have around fundraising strategy, or is this right to ask? When in doubt, ask. That's what I would say, because my favorite fundraising advice is, if you want money, ask for advice, but if you want advice, ask for money. And it's really, really true. So when in doubt, ask for that advice, and you never know what it can turn into.
Thanks so much for that, Rachel. Okay, so quickly wrapping up, those were really great questions, everyone, by the way. I'm just going to quickly share my screen again. So we would like to do a final poll very, very quickly, just to check in on how you're doing now. So I don't know if we can, oh yeah, perfect. The poll is on your screen. So after what you've learned today, how are you feeling about digital fundraising strategy now? So are you feeling still completely uncomfortable, still in need of a ton of help? And if so, don't worry, we do have future trainings. Or are you feeling significantly better? Just a few seconds to cast your vote. Okay, thanks everyone, and maybe we can share the results. Amazing. Okay, so we have a lot of people feeling better. Some feeling a bit more comfortable, but still have a long way to go. And that's completely natural. After a 1 hour training session, you're not gonna suddenly be, you know, absolute experts. And as we've said, there will be future sessions. And I mean, the good news is that we're all on some level of comfortable. So that's really great to hear. So just a very quick reminder, that we will see you all next week on Wednesday, the 16th of February, for a session all about messaging, pitching. We'll be looking at some good examples from other women and girl charity campaigns. So that's going to be a really great session. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks. We hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for being so engaged. I don't know if the Big Give has any final things.
I think just to say, if you had questions that didn't get answered, maybe we missed them in the chat, or you just feel like you need some support, please feel free to reach out. Beth and Sahil will be the main ones answering your questions. So please reach us at hello@thebiggive.org.uk. We're a friendly bunch. We'd love to hear from you. We're here to support you and make the most of this opportunity. So feel free to reach out, but really looking forward to keeping in touch with you all. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.